BP has poured hundreds of thousands of gallons of it into the Gulf, not only by air, but underwater. That a process not only unprecedented, but untested. Now, Greenwire reports that BP has released monitoring data from as recently as June 29th, results of testing its cleanup workers and finding that 20% of offshore workers and 15% of nearshore workers had 10 parts per million of the dispersant solvent called 2-butoxyethanol, twice the toxicity limit of 5 parts per million dictated by the CDC's National Institute for Occupational Health and Safety. More than 47,000 people are working to clean up the spill right now, and because one way to get exposed to 2-butoxyethanol is to breathe it, a new coalition of environmental and fishing groups has launched a site called BPMakesMeSick.com, petitioning President Obama to make BP give the workers respirators. The effort to stop rather than to conceal the spill could take a major step forward this weekend. BP is hoping to attach a tighter containment cap to the spill by Monday morning. Now, the oil will flow unimpeded after the current cap is removed earlier than that, and bring a new vessel as well, the Helix Producer, collecting from a different part of the leak starting Sunday. And if all that fails, possibly funnel the oil for miles along the seafloor to other wells. The political fallout also continuing unimpeded. Democrats, the DNC, launching a website of their own targeting what we have called the GOBP. This site, BPRepublicans.com, reminding voters that Republicans like Congressman Joe Barton apologized to BP, and that the Nevada Senate hopeful Sharon Angle called BP's Gulf Coast compensation system and of escrow a slush fund, a point the president happily referred to as well at a fundraiser last night for Angle's rival, the incumbent Senator Harry Reid. Republican Senate candidate Rand Paul of Kentucky also getting reminded of his support for BP at his first debate last night with Democratic challenger Jack Conway. But perhaps most telling was an interview with a Republican no longer in power, John E. Burton, for 5 years head of President Bush's MMS, the agency that oversaw drilling. Burton, the former owner of an oil company, telling the Wyoming Star Tribune, quote, "When I was there, it worked well." Her successor, Randall Luthi, also part of Dick Cheney's Wyoming Republican circle, and once Cheney's intern, refused to comment. He is now president of the trade group representing offshore drillers. Let's turn first to Marilee Orr, executive director of the Louisiana Environmental Action Network, part of the coalition behind BPMakesMeSick.com. Marilee, thanks again for your time tonight.
Oh, Keith, it's an honor to be here. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to share with you.
Your reaction to this report from Greenwire concerning the toxicity levels that BP is itself reporting among the cleanup workers?
Keith, I wish I could say I was surprised. I wish I could say I was shocked. But considering we've been talking to Alaskan fishermen, the Waterkeeper Alliance, the keepers that are there, telling us that these chemicals are very toxic and can make you very sick, unfortunately, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised at all.
Why don't the workers have respirators now? We've been talking about this for almost the length of this time of the attempt to clean this up.
We talked about that before, Keith. I believe it's a liability issue. They're saying that they're not finding anything in the air that means that you could use a respirator. We feel that a worker has the right to choose whether or not they use a respirator. A lot of our fishers that are out there, so they're smelling things, they're getting sick. We want to err on the side of health and safety. I think it's really imperative that the folks who are cleaning up the spill clean it up safely and they can go home to their families healthy.
But the government didn't stop BP from using a more highly toxic dispersant even than the normal toxic dispersants. It has not ensured that workers can wear respirators, let alone mandate that. How much of the blame does the government have ethically and down the road when it comes to this legally?
I think a lot of the folks are deeply disappointed in the government's response, in that when they think of the government, they think that government will protect me. They'll make sure that I'm safe. They'll make sure that my workplace is safe. They feel like they have not been aggressive enough in addressing this issue. As we know, BP has not been transparent about the amount of oil, and we have 1.72 million gallons of dispersant. We have a world record in our beloved Gulf. So I think morally, you know, maybe that's a question for their conscience, but legally, I think that will certainly be talked about in the courts. Folks should have stepped up earlier, and certainly here we are 81 or so days. Keith, you can remind me, because I've been doing this 24 hours a day since it started, it seems like. We've been talking about the respirator issue, and we're still talking about it, and our folks are still not allowed to use it. They're told that they'll be reassigned or they'll be fired if they use protective gear.
So given this report about 2-butoxyethanol and the government's unwillingness, lack of interest, fear of BP, whatever it is, what should workers be doing on their own right now, tomorrow morning, when they are to get to work and be involved in the cleanup? Is it one of these things where we're going to have a strike of people who are trying to clean the Gulf before anything gets done here?
I'd like to think that they could do that, go to their work site and say, I demand that I have protective gear. It's not just the respirators, but other gear as well. But unfortunately, they're afraid. They're afraid that they're going to lose their job. They won't be able to feed their family. So we become their voice, and that's why BPMakesMeSick.com is so important. We wonder if people care about the Gulf. We've had 1,000 people an hour sign up to say that they want these folks to be able to choose whether or not they have a respirator. Can you believe that? It's a wonderful feeling. More than 40,000 people from around the United States are saying, let's keep these folks safe so they can go home to their families and be safe and not be like the lesson that we learned in Alaska, where people are still ill, the lesson that we learned in 9/11. I mean, I wonder, we do not want history to keep repeating itself. We want it to stop here at the Gulf. And you've been a big part of that, Keith. You've been helping us get this message out and making people respond, and we thank you so much for that.
You're more than welcome. That's our responsibility as citizens and as people who live in the same place called the Earth. Corporations don't mind if we repeat history because it's cheaper that way. Mary Lee Orr of Louisiana Environmental Action Network. It's bpmakesmesick.com. Good luck with that, and great thanks for your continuing efforts on this.
Thank you so much, Keith. I hope to visit with you again soon. Thank you.
Anytime.